Imagine that you have spent hours working on an essay, or maybe you have spent years working on your doctoral dissertation. You have poured your heart and soul into this assignment, and you are excited to turn it into your professor and get that feedback that you have worked so hard for. But unfortunately, as soon as you go to submit your assignment, it is automatically rejected. You get a big fat 0. And you are turned over to the Office of Academic Misconduct because some software program has determined that you have used artificial intelligence software to write your paper. You're absolutely devastated because you know that you wrote every single word in that assignment. But what can you do? The software has said that you cheated. This scenario is absolutely terrifying, but it's something that I predict will become more and more common, and the overuse of AI detection software will lead to multiple false positives where innocent people are convicted of cheating on assignments. So, what do we do about it? Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm the part-time economist, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about why AI detection software can be especially problematic when it's applied to an academic context. So we're going to look at the theory behind artificial intelligence. We will understand how AI detection software works. Then we will understand on a theoretical level why it's inherently flawed, as well as giving you first-hand examples and illustrations of how easy it is to generate false positives with AI detection software. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Okay, so before we start thinking about how do we detect AI-generated content, we need to understand how does AI generation even work. Now, I'm going to present things kind of a big picture overview. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it than this, but the basic premise is that AI software is a computer program, and it is trained on a data set, right? So it goes through and it looks at pre-existing work to help it understand what is a good sentence, what words should I use. So let me give you an example. Let's suppose that I wanted to create an AI program that generated poetry. I would give this AI program the complete works of Shakespeare, of Edgar Allan Poe, of Emerson, right? All of the poets that I could think of, I would give it to this software. What the software would do is it would read through and it would understand, oh, okay, this is a simile, this is a metaphor, this is what a well-structured sentence sounds like. And then when I asked it to produce some kind of content, it would go through and it would mishmash and rearrange pre-existing content to generate something. So I could say, write a poem about a butterfly in the spring, right? And it would go through and it would say, oh, have any of my pre-existing sources talked about butterflies in the spring, right? And it would start combining those different aspects. So essentially what AI generation does is it looks at examples and it uses those examples to create new content, right? So that's AI. How does AI detection software work? AI detection software works by analyzing specific patterns and structures that are common to AI-generated text, particularly consistent sentence structures, predictable word choices, and a lack of variation in sentence length. So, do you see the problem here? When we say, does a student's work resemble AI? What we are essentially saying is, does a student's work resemble not just AI, because where does the stuff AI generates come from? Human work, right? So, does the student's work represent human-generated work? And specifically when it comes to our poetry example, if we are training the AI software on Poe, on Shakespeare, right, on the greats of poetry, right, the closer that a student writes to Poe, the closer that a student writes towards Shakespeare, right, the closer that the student comes to writing the most inspirational poetry, right, the more likely they're going to be found guilty of using AI. If the student just slops some words together with grammatical errors, they're not going to be accused of AI because AI doesn't write like that. AI writes according to good form, according to the data that it was trained on, right? And this is what's so problematic from an academic context. When these AI models are trained, right, we're not training them on garbage writing with terrible sentence structure, right? We're training them on academic journals, right? All of the scholarly works that are out there. So AI isn't perfect, but over time it gets closer. So over time, writing produced by AI is going to be equivalent to saying something looks like it came out of a scholarly journal. So here's the problem, right? If we say that AI resembles scholarly journals, and we say that students' writing resembles AI, we are essentially saying, hey, student, you are getting accused of AI usage because your writing resembles academic journals, right? This is the problem. So you can see here, right? Consistent sentence structures, predictable word choices. When we think of training students to write, we want them to write not in a cookie cutter format, but there are certain conventions that are used, right? We want transition sentences. We want complex sentence structures. There are certain phrases, certain terminology that we just use in specific disciplines. We want students to embody those characteristics, but the closer the student comes to writing in a consistent format, the closer the student comes to using predictable word choices, right? So if the student says it's raining cats and dogs, that's a predictable word choice, right? So this is the problem. The closer the student adheres to a given format that is common in their discipline, the closer their work is going to resemble the journal articles that the AI was trained on, and consequently the generative content that AI produces, right? So the better our students do, the more likely they are to get accused of using AI. And I want to show you a first-hand example of this. So this is a sentence, a passage that I wrote for one of my doctoral assignments. Now, keep in mind, I wrote every single word of this myself. It uses complex sentence structures. It uses big vocabulary, right? And I'm going to read it to you. So it says, on the surface, it's easy to assume that managers and CEOs are solely responsible for the organization's actions. However, the stakeholder responsibility model suggests that organizational responsibility is not a monolithic construct that is unilaterally upheld by one group. Rather, stakeholder responsibility implies a diffusion of responsibility with different groups of stakeholders responsible for upholding different ethical components, right? I wrote every single word of that. That's how I write. But notice that 50% of this passage was AI generated. Again, that is a massive false positive. It is not. It resembles the way that other academics write. So this is a huge problem. Now, let me show you where this becomes problematic, because if students are overly concerned about getting busted for using AI, right, they are going to change their writing style. And we've already said that AI resembles the best writing style. So how can a student make their writing less like AI? Well, the closer they get to good academic journal writing style, the more resembling AI they are. So they have to go the other way. They have to dumb down their writing. They have to use sentences that we don't want them to be using in a graduate level context, right? So look at this example. Some people think that only business leaders are responsible for what an organization does. This isn't true, though. The theory of stakeholder responsibility says that business leaders aren't the only ones who have a responsibility. Each group of people is responsible for different things. This is the same intent, right? This conveys the same meaning as what I said in the previous passage. But what you'll notice is that the sentence structure is more simple. There's misspellings in here. There are things that are clearly wrong with this. It does not resemble graduate level writing. It does not. This is, even if this was an undergraduate paper, it would still have some things that I would say, hey, add some complexity, add some variety, right? So what you'll notice, though, is because this it does not resemble the academic journals. It does not resemble the best examples of writing that AI was trained on. I have no AI in this. Now, is that good? Is that the outcome we're looking for? No. We want students to write to reflect trends in journals. We want them to embody a certain style, right? Whether it's APA, MLA, whatever the case is. We want them to write in a certain way. What we're doing with this fear-mongering over AI, right? And I'm not saying people should cheat. I'm not saying people shouldn't do their own assignments. But this over-reliance on AI detection software is going to make students fearful. They're going to deliberately put mistakes in their writing because they don't want to get expelled, because they don't want to get accused of misconduct. And I want to be clear, this is not a personal gripe that I have. I have never in my academic career been accused of misusing AI, right? this isn't a personal beef. This is something that a lot of other people are saying as well. If we look at the Center for Transformative Teaching, I believe this is out of the University of Nebraska, but essentially what they're saying is, hey, there is some massive problems with these AI checkers. They specifically affect certain groups of students disproportionately, right? So people learning English. If English is your second language, right? Spanish is my second language. When I speak in Spanish, I don't have a lot of complex vocabulary. I use very predictable phrases, right? Because that's what I know. My Spanish is somewhat basic, I guess intermediate, but still, it's not going to be very complex, right? It's going to be predictable. Where is this? Did you do that, right? That is going to get flagged by AI because it is predictable. At the same time, we want it to be predictable, right? Again, going back to it's raining cats and dogs. We want people to use that saying. We don't want them to say it's raining cats and spoons, right? It wouldn't make sense. The same thing when it comes to neurodivergent authors. If I am neurodivergent, right, and I write in a specific way, consistent structure of sentences, I always write my subject, verb, this, right? I always start sentences off in a certain way. It is going to penalize me. Another thing, and I'm going to share the screenshot here. If you don't use things like I, we, me, if you don't use personal pronouns, again, you are getting flagged for AI. Why is that a problem? The entire point of scholarly writing is to be objective third person, to not use personal pronouns, right? Again, the closer you come to aligning with these academic styles, the closer you come to being accused of using artificial intelligence. So, I've pointed out, hopefully, that this is a problem. The main problem, my main thesis here is that over time, AI-generated content will resemble what it is trained on. Since we are training AI on examples of good writing, over time, AI-generated content is going to be synonymous with this content matches the style of the leading authors in the field. So the closer our student comes to resembling the key authors in the field, the closer they're going to come to getting accused of AI. So what do we do about it? What I suggest, and again, I'm not an expert, I'm just someone brainstorming ideas on the internet. I think we need to give students the opportunity to create a baseline, because right now when we're using this AI detection software, AI is just looking at big general patterns. It has no idea whether our student is a native English speaker or whether it's their third language. It has no idea whether or not our student is neurodivergent, right? It has no idea any of these things. So what we need to do is we need to create a baseline for the student, something that we know is written by them, right? Now, obviously, we can't sit there and watch our student every single minute of the day write their dissertation over the next year, right? That's completely impractical. But what we can do is we can have something like an online Zoom session where we have students write a one-page essay, completely free write, right? I'm not saying they need to write an academic essay. I just want to get, how does their sentence structure look? How does their vocabulary look, right? Because that gives me a baseline, something that I know was written by the student. So when I see a student write their free write essay that I know was written by them, and they're using short, choppy sentence structures, they are using predictable, basic vocabulary, and then I see their essay that I don't know whether or not it was written by them, but I can say, look, I see common themes here, common patterns that are unique to this student. On the flip side, if there's someone like me out there who is going to write paragraph-long sentences, right? It is what it is. And if I write that free write essay, the teacher, the professor, they can see, oh wow, this student uses a lot of complex vocabulary. They use all of these subordinate clauses, right? And then they see that reflected in my writing. It doesn't prove that I didn't use AI, but it gives me an opportunity to say, look, this is my style of writing. When it wasn't for a grade, when I had no incentive to cheat, when I had no incentive to use AI, this is how I write. When I write for a grade, this is also how I write. And that similarity, I think, is essential because, again, what we're doing now with this over-reliance on AI, we are going to be penalizing people for embodying the conventions that we are supposedly training them to use. So What we want to see is that, yes, they are using these conventions. We don't want them to dumb down their writing. We don't want them to deliberately put in spelling and grammar mistakes, right? We don't want that. What we do want is we want them to embody the conventions, but we want to have that sample that says, yes, you are embodying the conventions, but I have evidence that you have actually internalized these structures, these conventions, these things that I'm wanting you to do. So those are just my thoughts. Obviously, I'm not an expert, but I do see this becoming a problem, and I'm just here trying to help prevent innocent people from getting convicted of things that they simply didn't do. So if you have any thoughts, if you have any concerns, ideas that I didn't cover, be sure and leave them down in the comments below. As always, I do appreciate you watching, and I hope you have a phenomenal rest of your day.